Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com.
All rise, please.
All right, Mr. Perry, would you stand, please, sir? You ready for trial?
Yes.
I have a complaint brought by the New Hampshire State Police. It's a motor vehicle violation from the 16th of May, 2012. The charge is that on South Main Street in Newport, you did fail and neglect to have a vehicle registered that you were operating in accordance with RSA 261-40, and you wear the charge.
Yes.
And you filed 2 motions to dismiss.
One to dismiss and one for an exemption from the supposed requirement to register a personal vehicle.
And so I'll consider those motions in the context of the evidence presented and rule on them after the trial. State's ready for trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
Can we take the stand? And if you raise your right hand, please, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
May you see. Just keep your voice up nice and loud so that everything you say is heard by those of us present and recorded. Go right ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. On May 16, 2012, approximately 4:40 p.m.
Why don't you identify yourself for the record, please?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm Trooper Jason Hancock from the New Hampshire State Police. I've been employed with Department of Safety since 2004. I'm currently assigned to Troop G, which is the Commercial Motor Vehicle Unit, and the DMV Investigative Unit.
All right.
On May 16th, approximately 4:40 p.m., I was traveling north on South Main Street. The court could take judicial notice that South Main Street in Newport is a way.
I'll do that.
I pulled up behind a vehicle at the intersection of 11103 and South Main Street in the left-hand turn lane, and I noticed a plate on it that was unusual to me in that it had a big star on the side of it. Loosely identified it with the state of Texas plate. It looked unusual because I just don't see a lot of those. So I went ahead and ran the plate to find out if it was in fact a valid plate. When I talked to the dispatcher and read the plate numbers and letters back to her, she identified that plate as being no longer registered because it had expired 2 months prior.
It was a plate issue, or what state's name?
Texas.
Texas license plate.
Yes, Your Honor. So what I did is I followed that vehicle, turned on the emergency lights, followed the vehicle around onto 11103 from South Main Street. The vehicle then turned right into the Irving gas station, if you're familiar, and pulled in the pump area. I got out of the cruiser, I approached the vehicle, told the driver that the vehicle license plate registration was in fact expired, and asked the driver for his identification and any registration paperwork he may have. At that time, the driver presented me with an Arizona driver's license and some paperwork for registration in the state of Texas. Took that paperwork back to the cruiser. I informed them who I was, who I worked for, that so on. Went back to the cruiser, double checked that the plate was in fact no longer registered with the dispatcher, and created a summons for failure to register the vehicle. Went back up to the driver, identified as the defendant, Mr. Gerald Perry, and told him that I was issuing a summons. And I went through my normal spiel basically for when I issue a summons. The court of jurisdiction is Newport District Court, and I explained it was right down the street from where we were if he was unfamiliar, because he had an Arizona driver's license. I explained that he had a few choices to make: guilty, not guilty, or no contender, but he needed to answer the summons within 30 days. Mr. Perry answered that he understood, but asked that he had a jury trial. I told Mr. Perry that I had no way of making that decision. The only person that can make that decision is the court. And from then on, I departed and continued on with my day from there on out. That was the end of my interaction with Mr. Perry.
And you see the gentleman today that was driving the vehicle?
I do. Mr. Perry, he's seated at the defendant's table.
You may cross-examine Trooper Hickox if you have any questions. You can go right ahead.
Yes, You testified that you saw me traveling north on South Main.
Yes.
How far did you actually witness me travel?
On South Main Street?
During the total duration, your officer notes don't note a distance.
Yes.
How far, the total distance?
Well, it'd probably be about 300, maybe 300 yards total.
Okay.
That's liberal. I mean, from the time that I was behind you and noticed that the plate was expired till the time that you pulled into Irving,
I just noticed that the officer notes do say market distance, which was not done. Was I violating the posted speed limit?
No,
Was I traveling in an unsafe manner?
nope,
While operating the vehicle, was I being potentially hazardous to other drivers?
nope,
And you testify that I was not speeding, being unsafe, or otherwise being dangerous, correct?
that's correct.
Are you familiar with Article 19 of the New Hampshire Constitution, which you swore to uphold?
Generally, yes.
Okay, Article 19 reads in part, every subject hath a right to be secure from all unreasonable searches and seizures of his person, his house, his papers, and his possessions. You will agree that a vehicle was a possession?
Yes.
How then was running a check of the license plate not an unreasonable search?
It's not unreasonable because in the state of New Hampshire, we can run any vehicle that's operating on the ways of the state of New Hampshire.
So there's total discretion of, oh, I see a license plate, I just want to run it for absolutely no reason?
Yes,
Would you say that you had probable cause to run my plate?
probable cause to run your license plate.
Yes.
The fact that
Whereas you believed that I was committing some kind of a crime or had committed a crime?
the reason why I ran the license plate because the plate was definitely unusual in that it's not a normal Texas license plate. I think we can both agree with that.
Texas has like 75 different plates that they allow people to get.
Okay.
Do you run every out-of-state license plate that you see?
No.
So you admit that you use discretion on how to enforce RSA 26140?
I use discretion based on what I saw.
Do you always ticket people for expired registration, or do you sometimes issue warnings?
I do sometimes issue warnings.
And how do you decide whether to issue a warning or a ticket?
Generally speaking, if it's really close to the registration time, I may ask them, I'll issue a summons and say you need to have the vehicle registered. If you provide proof, then I'll dismiss the ticket or place it on file.
And what, if anything, influenced your decision to give me specifically a ticket instead of a warning?
The reason why I issued a summons is that your vehicle had been expired for a period of time that was longer. And it was unreasonable if you were traveling through for you to come back and provide proof.
Did you notice anything unusual about my vehicle?
Anything unusual about you? No.
Bumper stickers?
Oh, actually, I did notice that there were bumper stickers on it.
Do you recall specifically what any of those bumper stickers said?
No.
Okay. Did the bumper stickers on my vehicle influence your decision to give me a ticket instead of a warning?
No.
And what facts, if any, do you have to prove that I am subject to RSA 26140?
You're traveling on the ways of the state of New Hampshire?
Okay, more specifically, what facts do you have to prove that I have agreed to abide by the statutes of the government of New Hampshire?
You drive in the state of New Hampshire?
Okay, you're familiar with Article 3 of the New Hampshire Constitution?
Generally speaking, if you need a refresher, I can certainly.
I don't have it written down, but it roughly states that people supposedly give up rights for the greater good in return for a government issuing protection. The Supreme Court of the United States has ruled that governments are not duty-bound to protect individuals, that police are there to enforce laws. And Article 3 also says, without this protection, the surrender of rights is void. So based on that, since there is no duty for the government to protect me, and Article 3 specifies that without that protection, the surrender of rights is void, what facts do you have to prove that I am subject to the laws of New Hampshire?
You are operating a vehicle in the state of New Hampshire.
Okay.
Do you not want the protection of New Hampshire?
Well,
One second. The witness is on the stand sworn to answer,
Yes, Your Honor.
answer questions, and you may cross-examine. If Mr. Perry takes a stand, you may have an opportunity to cross-examine him and ask him questions, but not at this time.
My apologies, Your
You
Honor.
may continue.
The government of New Hampshire is not duty-bound under federal court ruling to give me protection. And I don't believe that my rights are being protected, specifically the Article 2, Article 4, Article 10, and Article 19 rights. Article 10 specifies, I have that written down here, government being instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the whole, and not for the private interest or emolument of any one man, family, or class of men. Therefore, whenever the government are perverted and public liberty manifestly endangered, and all other means of redress are ineffectual, the people may, and of right ought to reform the old, or establish a new government. The doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and happiness of mankind. So I believe that it is my right to attempt to bring about governmental reform. I never agreed nor signed papers stating that I pledged allegiance to any government. And in fact, I am a member of the Shire Society. Are you familiar with the Shire Society?
I've heard of it.
Okay, and part the 4th of the Shire Society Declaration states, explicit voluntary association is the only means by which binding obligations may be created, and claims based on association or relationships to which any party did not consent are empty and invalid. I have never consented to any currently recognized government, so it is my position that RSA 26140 is invalid and the entire vehicle registration code is invalid, because you are aware that there are exemptions for certain individuals
Exemptions from what?
from the fees associated with vehicle registration in the state of New Hampshire.
Are you aware of that?
That a person could be completely exempt from the registration of the vehicle.
Are you aware of that? Is the question.
I'm not aware of that.
You are aware that certain individuals are exempt from the fees associated with registration, correct?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. The RSA does actually specify individuals and groups who are exempt, those being disabled veterans, prisoners of war, blind veterans, as well as certain vehicles owned by nonprofits, all motor vehicles owned and driven by the state, county, city, town, or school district, any motor vehicle owned or driven by a volunteer fire department, and any motor vehicle owned and driven by a public or private educational institution for the purpose of driver's training. And I just have 2 final questions. What proof, if any, do you have to support the claim that I violated RSA 26140?
You are operating a vehicle in the state of New Hampshire.
What physical evidence?
Excuse me 1 second. Let him, you can answer the question, but you gotta let him answer the question you've asked.
Any person that operates a vehicle in the state of New Hampshire is required to have that vehicle registered, whether it be through your own jurisdiction or ours.
But what physical evidence do you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that I am guilty of violating RSA 26140?
The fact that I ran your registration and no valid registration exists, that it was expired, that is the evidence.
But what physical evidence do you have to present today in court?
I don't have any physical evidence.
Thank you, no further questions.
You stopped Mr. Perry on May 16th of this year,
I did, Your Honor.
and you say when you stopped him, he presented you with an Arizona driver's license.
Yes, sir.
And he presented you with some form of hard copy of a registration
That's correct.
issued by,
Texas.
and did it reflect when it was effective and when it was to expire?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you recall?
I believe it was March, but I can't remember the exact date.
March of this year was what?
The expiration date.
Any other questions regarding that?
No further questions.
No further questions, you may step down, thanks very much. Any other witnesses from the state's perspective?
No, state election.
State reps, all right, you may be seated. Mr. Perry, you may take a stand if you wish, you may call yourself to testify, you have the right to remain silent. If you
I
wish-
have no witnesses.
Do you wish to testify?
No, sir.
All right. RSA 26140 is the provision of the Motor Vehicle Code. The defendant has been charged with violating that statute. Says that it is a violation for any person to drive any vehicle which is not specifically exempt by statute or rule from the requirement of registration unless the same has been registered and the appropriate fee paid in accordance with the provisions of this chapter. The only evidence presented to this court is that Mr. Perry was operating a motor vehicle on a public way in the state of New Hampshire and that the vehicle was not registered. No other evidence has been presented to this court. And so your motion to dismiss has been denied and the motion to receive an exemption from the requirement to register a personal automobile has also been denied based upon a lack of any evidence to support either motion. And the charge of failing and neglecting to have the vehicle that you were operating registered in accordance with law, contrary to RSA 26140, I do find you guilty of violating that charge. The statute says the fine for a violation of this section shall be $100. And so I've imposed a fine of $100. The penalty assessment by statute associated with all fines is 24%, and so I've added $24 penalty assessment to the fine. The total fine and penalty assessment, that's $124 after finding him guilty. I would ask you, Mr. Perry, to please stop at the window in the lobby of the clerk's office before you exit the courthouse so that you can address the question of payment of the fine.
I would like to motion the court to allow me to donate this money to a charity.
The fine and penalty assessment is due the court, and you must pay the court the fine. It's not permitted or allowed to pay anyone else.
I would like to motion the court to allow me to do community service in lieu of the fine.
You certainly can file such a motion, and I'll be happy to consider that. You'll have to file a written request with the clerk to do community service and a financial affidavit signed under oath. I have to make a finding that you are indigent and not able to pay the fine before I can permit you to do community service. But if you truly have no ability to pay the fine, you may discharge the fine by doing community service and receive credit at the rate of $10 an hour. So you'd be required to do that. The amount of hours of community service to match the $124 that are due. The clerk will go over all that with you at the window.
Okay.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
All rise, please.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.